I think. I'm Kristian Husum. I work with KORN FERRY, the world's largest talent advisory business. I'm based in Copenhagen, and I'm an organizational psychologist, and I advise clients in Europe about talent and leadership. What I want to talk about today is literally three things. I guess the whole theme of what we've been talking about today is agility. So I'm going to start a little bit higher. I want to talk about what's going on in HR. I want to talk about why does agility matter, and then I'm hoping to also have a moment to share, some tips for what can you do tomorrow if you think agility matters as well. So I guess we've been seeing a lot of stuff today about the world's changing, and I have my slide as well from KORN FERRY about how the world is changing. And I guess everybody thinks that the world right now, we're at a critical injunction point where the world is going to be totally different tomorrow than it was today. So I think some of these things are, yeah, so what? Some of them are really important. Half the companies that were in the top of the Fortune 500 less than 20 years ago are no longer in existence. They've been consolidated, they've been bankrupted, they've been, gone out of existence. So the pace at which businesses are, growing and going away is accelerating. Another important point is that I think we saw something about millennials or younger generations, and I think in a very short period of time, 3/4 of the workforce is actually going to have joined the workforce since 2000, so they're going to be millennials. So that's a significant disruption and a switch in talent practices and what's required of HR. So KORN FERRY did a bit of research recently. We've just published a white paper, which I urge you to go and have a look at. You can get it on the KORN FERRY Institute webpage. So basically what we did is we looked at what are organizations doing, leading large international organizations doing to address this shift. We also did some roundtables and interviews. So basically we did a thorough bit of research, and what we found was that about half of the organizations that we spoke with are currently looking at refreshing their talent management practices. They've gotten a far way in implementing talent management and succession and performance and all the stuff that you're probably working on today, but half of organizations are looking to refresh. A third of the organizations that we're looking at were looking to radically disrupt the way they work with talent today. Now, I'm not going to give you all of the examples, but I guess, who works with a 9-box grid in your organization today? Let me just see, show of hands, somebody? Yeah, 9-box potential performance grid. Yeah. So I've been in HR, and I've spent hours and hours and months hammering in the 9-box grid in my organization. And what we see now is that some companies are actually saying that to put simplification at heart and to really simplify. So a company like Telefonica, that's one of the world's largest mobile operators, they've thrown out the 9-box grid, not because they don't think performance and potential is important, but because managers had gotten an instrumental relationship. Doing a performance review was no longer about figuring out who has potential to do more for the organization. It was more about checking boxes and filling out templates and sending stuff to HR. We've also seen that organizations are looking much more at the person in question. So we did another study about female CEOs, where actually we found that 10% or 90% of female CEOs did not know 5 years ago that they aspired to become a CEO. So looking in depth at understanding the person and not the process is also a critical imperative that we see taking place today. So why is agility important? And I realize that there's lots of stuff here, so one of the critical points that we talked about, and I'm thinking back to what the professor from Oslo was talking about earlier today about organizational agility. I guess we're trying to zoom in a little bit more and say, why does agility matter for an individual? Why is it important for an individual leader? Well, here's another bit of information that we looked at some years ago. So if we look at the relationship between individual performance and potential, what we see is that fundamentally high performers are not always high potentials. In fact, less than a third of high performers in organizations are also high potentials. Okay? What we also see is that high potentials are pretty systematically also high performers. So the case being behind the 9-box grid, why do we need to look at potential at all? So the case for agility is really founded on this model of potential that KORN FERRY has devised. We've looked into thousands and thousands of leaders to try and discern how can we talk about potential? What is potential, and how can we measure potential? Now, some of these things, let me just start. Some of the top 2 predictors of potential, as we see it, is learning agility and self-awareness. I'm going to dig a little bit more into learning agility and self-awareness in a moment. But let me just talk about the whole model. So basically, this is saying what matters, what makes some people have potential for more, and what makes others have less potential for more. I want to talk about formative experiences. Formative experiences about looking at what the breadth of experience that a leader exposes. What we typically see when we look at leadership careers, I don't know about you guys, but what I often see is that people have built a very stalagmite career, like a very functionally specific career where a senior controller was promoted to team lead, was promoted to director of business controlling, was promoted to CFO. So a very, very narrow career. One of the indicators of potential that we see is to have breadth in the experiences, so that instead of just progressing through your career and taking another step as taking your boss's job, one of the things that we're advising clients to do is to, as they build their talent management systems, to focus on building breadth in the career. So instead of just seeing a promotion as taking a step up, we're seeing a lot more prevalence of horizontal career moves, where a career starts here, it can do a horizontal move into another function. So you start in customer service, you become team lead in customer service, and then you take a role out where you actually take a commercial role selling to clients. So formative experiences, logic and reasoning. The reason why I bring up formative experiences is that's actually something that organizations can do something about. What I'm going to talk about in a moment, learning agility and self-awareness, that's a little bit more difficult to work with, right? I used to work as a clinical psychologist, so I should be a strong believer in personal development. But, let me tell you, and I'm sure there's a lot of you out there as well who work as clinical psychologists, personal development is difficult. And it takes a lot of effort and will from the person developing. So learning agility defined, and this reason why I bring this up is this is absolutely one of the most critical indicators of potential that we see today. Learning agility is this. In principle, learning agility is the ability to dance in complexity and look good. So it's the ability and willingness to learn from your experiences and use those experiences in new situations to make intelligent and reflected decisions with people that you don't know. That's learning agility. And why is that important? It's important because everybody here has been telling you for the past day and a half that tomorrow looks significantly different than today. That's why learning agility is one of the most critical indicators of potential, and that's why we recommend and we believe, and I believe, that you should be gearing your talent systems to look for, spot, and develop talent who have learning agility, the ability to dance and look good to a tune that you don't know yet. This is not intelligence. I think it's important. A lot of people think that learning agility or mental agility is somehow intelligence or IQ. It's not. It's not. It's a mix of humbleness, curiosity, and other foundational characteristics. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not a bad thing to have high analytical capabilities, but learning agility in our research is just more important for your potential, okay? The other thing I want to talk about is self-awareness. So self-awareness, that's also one of our 7 signposts of potential. Now, this is a really cool chart that it took me, I think, half a year to really understand. But what this says is we surveyed thousands of people and benchmarked how do their companies do. What this says is if you're working in a high-performing company, you've got twice as big of a chance of having high self-awareness as if you're working in a low-performing company. Now, that's just a correlation, so let's not. But I think this definitely gives us an indication that being self-aware, being reflected about what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, and what's the impact that I have on other people? Do people think I'm boring? Do they think I'm interesting? Do they understand what I'm saying when I yell? What happens? So having an awareness of my strengths and weaknesses and what impact I have on others is also really important. It's really important for potential. And you could argue it's a part of learning agility. We see it as something separate, but I think seeing it as a foundational characteristic for leadership potential is definitely our view. Now, the last thing I want to leave you with is, so what does this matter for me? I mean, KORN FERRY, we're an advisory firm. Our business is to help organizations to implement competitive talent systems and to gain a competitive advantage. And you know what? Looking for potential is very tough. I've spent 15 years of my career trying to figure out how to get a little bit better at looking for and developing potential. But if you want to start somewhere, start by asking yourselves these questions as you're implementing your talent system in your organization. So, you know, these are just questions to identify 6 of the 7 signposts of leadership. If you can only ask 2 of them, I'd ask the number 3 and number 4. How effectively do you absorb and learn? How effectively do you dance a dance that you haven't danced before? How good does it look? And how well reflected are you about yourself as a leader? And with that, I want to say thank you.